Victoria Ashford looked perfect. She always did. Tonight was no different as she stood in front of the tall mirror in her Manhattan apartment. Her blonde hair fell in perfect waves down her back. Her red dress cost more than most people made in a month. The diamond ring on her finger caught the light and sparkled like stars. She smiled at her reflection. In 2 months, she would marry Marcus Sterling. Marcus was not just any man. He was one of the richest men in America. At 35 years old, he owned a tech company worth billions of dollars. And soon, Victoria would be his wife. Victoria picked up her phone and took a selfie. She made sure the ring showed in the picture. She posted it online with the words, "Ready for tonight's charity gala. Can't wait to be Mrs. Sterling." Within minutes, thousands of people liked her post. Comments poured in calling her beautiful and lucky. This was Victoria's life now. She had over 3 million followers on social media. Companies paid her lots of money to show their products. She went to fancy parties every week. She wore designer clothes and expensive jewelry. Everyone knew who she was. But Victoria had not always lived like this. 3 years ago, she was just another girl trying to make it in New York City. She worked at a coffee shop and lived in a tiny apartment with 2 roommates. Her life changed the day she met Marcus at a business event. Marcus was kind and smart. He was also very rich. Victoria knew right away that he could give her the life she wanted. She worked hard to make him fall in love with her. She learned about his business. She went to the gym every day to stay thin. She bought expensive clothes even when she could not afford them. It worked. Marcus proposed after 1 year of dating. The ring cost $2 million. Victoria quit her job the next day. She became a full-time influencer and Marcus's future wife. Now Victoria spent her days shopping, going to spas, and taking pictures for social media. She had a personal trainer, a chef, and a housekeeper. She lived in Marcus's penthouse apartment that looked out over Central Park. She drove a car that cost more than a house. But something had changed in Victoria over the past year. The money and fame had made her feel like she was better than other people. She looked down on anyone who was not rich or famous like her. She was rude to waiters and shop workers. She made mean comments about people who could not afford nice things. Marcus had started to notice this change in Victoria. At first, he thought it was just stress from planning their wedding, but it was getting worse. Last week, Victoria had yelled at a taxi driver for taking the wrong turn. The week before, she had complained loudly when a restaurant table was not ready on time. She always found something wrong with the service. Tonight was the annual Sterling Foundation Charity Gala. Marcus's company held this event every year to raise money for education programs. All the richest people in New York would be there. Victoria had been planning her outfit for months. Marcus arrived at the apartment at 6 o'clock. He wore a black suit that fit him perfectly. His dark hair was neat, and his blue eyes looked tired. Running a billion-dollar company was not easy, even for someone as smart as Marcus. "You look beautiful," Marcus said when he saw Victoria. She did look amazing in her red dress and diamond jewelry, but Marcus noticed how she barely looked up from her phone when he spoke. "Of course I do," Victoria said. She was reading comments on her latest post. "Look how many likes I got already. Everyone loves this dress." Marcus watched her for a moment. When had she become so focused on what strangers on the internet thought? When they first met, Victoria was interested in his work and his ideas. Now she only seemed to care about likes and followers. They rode to the hotel in Marcus's car. Victoria took selfies the whole way. She posted pictures of the car's leather seats and the city lights outside. She made sure everyone knew she was going to an exclusive event. The gala was held at the Plaza Hotel. The ballroom was decorated with white flowers and gold lights. 300 of the richest people in New York filled the room. Everyone wore expensive clothes and jewelry. Waiters walked around with champagne and fancy food. Victoria loved events like this. She felt like she belonged here with all these wealthy people. She walked through the room with her chin up and her shoulders back. People stopped to look at her ring and tell her how lucky she was to marry Marcus. "Victoria, darling," called out Margaret Whitman, the wife of a famous banker. "You look absolutely stunning tonight." Victoria smiled her perfect smile. "Thank you, Margaret. This dress is from Paris. I had it specially made for tonight. And that ring, Margaret said, grabbing Victoria's hand to look closer. Marcus certainly knows how to treat a lady. Victoria felt proud. She loved when people admired her ring and her clothes and her life. It made her feel important and special. Marcus was across the room talking to other business owners about the charity's work. Victoria watched him for a moment. He looked serious and passionate as he explained how the foundation helped kids get better education. This was the side of Marcus that made her fall in love with him in the first place. But Victoria was not really interested in the charity work anymore. She was more interested in being seen and admired. She walked around the room, making sure photographers took her picture. She posed with other wealthy wives and posted the photos online. During dinner, Victoria sat at the head table next to Marcus. The food was incredible, prepared by one of the city's best chefs. Victoria ate small bites and posted pictures of each course. She made sure to show her ring in every photo. The foundation raised over $10 million tonight, Marcus told her as they ate dessert. That money will help build 3 new schools in poor areas of the city. That's nice, Victoria said, but she was not really listening. She was looking at her phone to see how many new followers she had gained during the evening. Marcus noticed that Victoria was not paying attention. This happened more and more often. She seemed to care more about her online image than about real conversations with real people. After dinner, there were speeches about the foundation's work. Victoria clapped when everyone else clapped, but she spent most of the time on her phone. She was planning what to wear tomorrow and thinking about which stores she wanted to visit. As the evening ended, people came up to congratulate Victoria and Marcus on their upcoming wedding. Victoria smiled and thanked them, but inside she was already thinking about the next event, the next dress, the next photo opportunity. Marcus watched his fiancée as she posed for more pictures with their wealthy friends. She looked beautiful and perfect on the outside, but something inside her had changed. The kind, curious girl he had fallen in love with seemed to be disappearing, replaced by someone who only cared about money and fame and what other people thought of her. As they left the hotel that night, Marcus wondered if he was making the right choice in marrying Victoria. But he pushed those thoughts away. Surely this was just a phase. Surely the woman he loved was still there somewhere inside. 3 days after the charity gala, Marcus took Victoria to dinner at Le Bernardin, one of the most expensive restaurants in New York City. The restaurant was famous for its perfect food and excellent service. Only the richest people could afford to eat there. Victoria wore a new black dress that cost $5,000. Her hair was styled perfectly, and she wore the diamond earrings Marcus had given her for her birthday. She felt like a queen as they walked into the restaurant. The hostess recognized them immediately. "Mr. Sterling, Ms. Ashford, welcome back. Your usual table is ready." Victoria loved being recognized. She smiled widely and made sure other people in the restaurant saw her. She wanted everyone to know who she was and how important she was. Their table was in the best spot in the restaurant, near the window with a view of the city. Victoria immediately took out her phone to take pictures. She photographed the expensive wine, the beautiful plates, and of course herself. "The lobster looks amazing," Marcus said, looking at his plate. "How's your fish?" Victoria was not paying attention to her food. She was too busy taking pictures for social media. "It's fine," she said, without looking up from her phone. "Do you think this lighting is good for photos?" Marcus sighed quietly. Even at dinner, Victoria could not put her phone away. She was more interested in showing people online what she was eating than actually enjoying the meal with him. As they ate, Victoria posted picture after picture. She wrote captions about how perfect her life was and how lucky she was to eat at such an expensive restaurant. Her followers left comments telling her how jealous they were. Near the end of their meal, Victoria noticed an older woman sitting alone at a table across the restaurant. The woman looked to be in her 70s. She had gray hair and wore a simple blue sweater and old black pants. Her purse looked worn and old. Victoria stared at the woman and frowned. "What is she doing here?" she whispered to Marcus. "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. "That old woman over there. Look at her clothes. She doesn't belong in a place like this," Victoria said loudly enough that other people could hear. Marcus looked uncomfortable. Victoria, please keep your voice down. But Victoria was not done. The woman was everything Victoria looked down on. She was old, poorly dressed, and obviously did not have much money. Victoria felt angry that someone like that was allowed in the same restaurant as her. The older woman was trying to pay her bill when something went wrong. Victoria watched as the woman handed her credit card to the waiter. The waiter came back a few minutes later and spoke quietly to the woman. Even from across the room, Victoria could see that the woman looked upset. Her card was declined, Victoria said to Marcus with a mean smile. I knew she didn't belong here. The woman looked embarrassed as she searched through her purse for another card. Her hands shook a little as she gave the waiter a different card. Victoria watched like she was watching a TV show. The waiter came back again. This card was also declined. The woman's face turned red with embarrassment. She spoke quietly to the waiter, asking if she could call her bank. Victoria could not contain herself anymore. She stood up from her table and walked over to where the older woman sat. Her high heels clicked loudly on the restaurant's marble floor. Excuse me, Victoria said in a loud voice that everyone in the restaurant could hear. If you can't afford to eat here, why did you come? The older woman looked up at Victoria with surprise and hurt in her eyes. I'm sorry, there must be some mistake with my cards. I'm trying to fix it. A mistake? Victoria laughed meanly. The mistake was you thinking you could afford a place like this. Look at you. Look at your clothes. You're embarrassing yourself. Other people in the restaurant stopped eating to watch. They could not believe what they were seeing. Marcus sat frozen at their table, shocked by Victoria's behavior. Victoria was not done. She took out her phone and started recording a video of the older woman. Everyone needs to see this, she said, pointing the camera at the embarrassed woman. This is what happens when people don't know their place. Please stop, the older woman said quietly. Tears were starting to form in her eyes. Stop what, telling the truth? Victoria said louder. She made sure her phone captured everything. You come to an expensive restaurant wearing clothes that look like they came from a charity shop. You order expensive food when you obviously can't pay for it, and now you're crying because you got caught. The older woman tried to stand up to leave, but Victoria blocked her way. Where do you think you're going? You haven't paid your bill yet. Victoria, that's enough, Marcus finally said, standing up from their table. His face was red with embarrassment and anger, but Victoria ignored him. She was enjoying the attention too much. Other people were taking out their phones to record. What was happening? Victoria loved being the center of attention, even like this. Look at her, Victoria said to her phone camera. This is pathetic. Old people need to learn that they can't just go anywhere they want. There are places for people like her, and this isn't one of them. The older woman finally managed to get around Victoria. She walked quickly toward the exit, her head down in shame. But Victoria followed her with the camera still recording. That's right, run away, Victoria called after her. Maybe next time you'll think twice before trying to eat somewhere you don't belong. The restaurant manager came over quickly. Ms. Ashford, please, this is not appropriate. What's not appropriate is letting people like her in here, Victoria said. This is supposed to be a classy place. The older woman reached the door and left the restaurant without looking back. Victoria finally stopped recording and smiled at her phone. She had gotten everything on video. Marcus walked over to Victoria with an angry expression she had never seen before. What is wrong with you? He said in a low, furious voice. What do you mean? I was just pointing out the obvious, Victoria said. She was already editing the video on her phone. You just humiliated an innocent woman for no reason, Marcus said. That was cruel and unnecessary. Victoria shrugged. She humiliated herself by coming here when she clearly couldn't afford it. I was just being honest. Marcus stared at his fiancée like he was seeing her for the first time. The woman he loved would never have done something so mean and heartless. Who was this person wearing Victoria's face? I can't believe you recorded that, Marcus said. Are you going to post it online? Of course I am, Victoria said, already typing a caption. My followers will love this. They always like it when I keep it real. Marcus felt sick to his stomach. He could not believe the woman he was going to marry had just done something so cruel to an innocent stranger. The restaurant manager came over to their table. "Mr. Sterling, I'm very sorry about this situation. We've taken care of the lady's bill." "You paid for her?" Victoria asked, annoyed. "Why would you do that? She should have been more careful." "Because it was the right thing to do," the manager said coldly. "Something you might want to think about." Victoria posted the video as soon as they got home. She wrote a caption that said, "PSA, know your place. This lady tried to eat at a $200 per person restaurant and couldn't even pay. So, embarrassing, some people have no self-awareness." She expected her followers to laugh and agree with her. She expected hundreds of comments supporting her. She expected to get thousands of likes and shares. Instead, something very different happened. Something Victoria never expected. Something that would change her life forever. The internet was about to show Victoria exactly what happens when cruelty meets consequences. Victoria woke up the next morning feeling excited. She reached for her phone to check how many likes and comments her video had gotten overnight. She expected to see thousands of people agreeing with her and praising her for being honest. Instead, she saw something that made her heart stop. Her phone was buzzing non-stop with notifications. But these were not the good kind of notifications she was used to getting. The video had been shared over 50,000 times, but not because people liked it. People were sharing it because they were angry and disgusted by what Victoria had done. The comments were filled with words like cruel, heartless, and disgusting. "What kind of person bullies an elderly woman?" One comment read. "This is the most horrible thing I've ever seen," said another. "She should be ashamed of herself," wrote a third person. Victoria's hands shook as she scrolled through comment after comment condemning her behavior. This was not what she had expected at all. She had thought people would find the video funny or at least understand her point of view, but it got worse. Much worse. Someone had created a hashtag called #Justice for Eleanor. Apparently, people had started calling the elderly woman Eleanor, even though Victoria had never mentioned her name in the video. The hashtag was spreading like wildfire across all social media platforms. People were posting their own stories about kind elderly women who had helped them. They shared photos of their grandmothers and great-aunts with messages about treating older people with respect and kindness. "My grandmother lived through the Great Depression and World War II," one person wrote. "She taught me that kindness costs nothing but is worth everything. This woman attacking an elderly lady makes me sick." Victoria felt panic rising in her chest. This was not supposed to happen. Her followers were supposed to support her, not turn against her. She called Marcus, but he did not answer his phone. She tried calling him 5 more times, but he ignored every call. By noon, the video had been shared over 200,000 times. News websites were starting to write articles about it. "Influencer bullies elderly woman at expensive restaurant," read one headline. Victoria's phone rang constantly with calls from reporters wanting to interview her. She ignored them all. This had to blow over soon, she told herself. People would forget about it in a few days, but people did not forget. They got angrier. Someone found Victoria's other social media posts from the past year. They made collections showing all the mean comments she had made about poor people, old people, and anyone she thought was beneath her. "Look at this pattern of behavior," people wrote. "This woman has been cruel for a long time. She thinks being rich makes her better than everyone else," said another comment. The hashtag #Justice for Eleanor was now trending worldwide. People from other countries were commenting on the video, expressing their disgust at Victoria's behavior. Victoria's Instagram followers started dropping rapidly. She lost 50,000 followers in one day. Companies that paid her to advertise their products began canceling her contracts. Her phone buzzed with an email from her biggest sponsor, a luxury makeup company. "Due to recent events, we are ending our partnership with you effective immediately," the email read. "Your behavior does not align with our company values." More emails followed. A jewelry company dropped her. A fashion brand canceled her contract. A hotel chain removed her from their influencer program. Victoria felt like her world was crashing down around her. This was supposed to be just a funny video. How had it turned into this nightmare? She tried to post an explanation on her social media. I was just being honest about what I saw, she wrote. People are overreacting. But this only made things worse. People were furious that she was not apologizing or showing any remorse for her actions. She still doesn't get it, people commented. No apology, no accountability, just excuses, wrote another person. Meanwhile, something beautiful was happening with the Justice for Elinor hashtag. People were not just condemning Victoria's behavior. They were sharing stories of kindness and compassion. A young man posted about an elderly woman who helped him when his car broke down in the rain. A college student shared how an older lady at the bus stop gave her lunch money when she realized she had forgotten her wallet. Elderly people have so much wisdom and kindness to offer, wrote one person. They deserve our respect, not our cruelty. The hashtag became more than just criticism of Victoria. It became a celebration of the elderly and a call for people to be kinder to each other. Marcus finally called Victoria back that evening. His voice was cold and distant. Victoria, we need to talk, he said. Marcus, thank God you called. This whole thing has gotten out of hand. People are being so mean to me over one little video, Victoria said. One little video? Marcus's voice rose in anger. Victoria, you humiliated an innocent woman. You filmed her while she was embarrassed and vulnerable. You posted it for millions of people to see, and you're calling it one little video? Victoria was shocked by the anger in his voice. Marcus had never spoken to her like this before. But she shouldn't have been at that restaurant if she couldn't afford it, Victoria said, still not understanding why everyone was so upset. That doesn't give you the right to treat her like that, Marcus said. The woman I fell in love with would never have done something so cruel. What do you mean? Victoria asked, though she was starting to feel scared. I mean, I don't know who you are anymore, Marcus said sadly. This isn't the first time you've been mean to someone, Victoria. It's just the first time millions of people saw it. Victoria could hear the disappointment in his voice. For the first time, she started to realize that maybe she had made a mistake. The next day brought even worse news. Victoria's phone was filled with death threats from angry people around the world. She was too scared to leave her apartment. More companies dropped her. Her talent agency called to tell her they could no longer represent her. Your reputation is too damaged, her agent explained. No one wants to work with you right now. Victoria watched as her Instagram followers continued to drop. She had lost over 500,000 followers in just 2 days. The news channels were talking about her video. They brought in experts to discuss cyberbullying and the responsibility that comes with having a large social media following. When you have millions of followers, your words and actions have real consequences, one expert said. This young woman used her platform to humiliate and hurt someone. That's not entertainment, it's cruelty. Victoria turned off the TV and sat in her expensive apartment, surrounded by all the luxury items that had once made her feel special. For the first time in months, she felt truly alone. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Marcus. I think we need to take a break from our engagement. I need time to think about everything that's happened. Victoria stared at the message in shock. Was Marcus really thinking about calling off their wedding? Was she going to lose everything because of one video? Outside her apartment window, the city continued its normal life. People went to work, families had dinner together, friends laughed and talked. But inside her luxury penthouse, Victoria sat alone with the consequences of her actions. The internet had spoken, and it had found her guilty. Now she would have to face whatever came next. Sarah Chen had been a journalist for 15 years. She worked for the New York Tribune and was known for finding the truth behind big stories. When she saw Victoria's video and the reaction it was getting, she knew there was more to this story than just a mean influencer bullying an old woman. Sarah was good at her job because she asked questions that other people did not think to ask. While everyone else was focused on criticizing Victoria, Sarah was wondering about the elderly woman in the video. Who was she? What was her story? Why was she at such an expensive restaurant? Sarah watched the video dozens of times looking for clues. The woman was well-spoken and seemed educated. Her clothes were simple but clean and neat. She had tried to pay with 2 different credit cards, which suggested she usually had money to spend. Sarah started her investigation by calling the restaurant. At first, the manager did not want to talk to her. Bad publicity was not good for business. "I understand you want to protect your customers' privacy," Sarah told the manager. "But this woman has become the center of a huge story. People want to help her, but they don't even know who she is." After some convincing, the manager agreed to give Sarah a few basic details. The woman's name was Eleanor Matthews. She was 72 years old and lived in Manhattan. She had been coming to the restaurant for many years and had never had problems paying before. "She's always been a lovely customer," the manager said. "Very polite and kind to our staff. What happened that night was very unusual for her." Sarah thanked the manager and started searching for Eleanor Matthews online. It was harder than she expected. There were many Eleanor Matthews in New York, and most elderly people did not have much of an online presence. Sarah tried a different approach. She went to the public library and looked through old newspapers and phone books. She searched through city records and property databases. After hours of searching, Sarah found something interesting. There was an Eleanor Matthews who had been married to a man named Dr. James Matthews. The name James Matthews sounded familiar to Sarah, but she could not remember why. Sarah searched for Dr. James Matthews online and found something that made her heart race. Dr. James Matthews had been a computer scientist in the 1970s and 1980s. He had helped create some of the basic technology that made the internet possible. Dr. Matthews had died 10 years ago, but during his lifetime, he had become very wealthy from his inventions. His work had made him millions of dollars. If this was the same Eleanor Matthews, then the woman Victoria had humiliated was not poor at all. She was the widow of a very successful man, but Sarah needed more proof. She kept digging. She found old photos from technology conferences where Dr. Matthews had spoken. In some of the photos, there was a woman standing next to him. The woman had dark hair and was younger, but Sarah could see similarities to the elderly woman in Victoria's video. Sarah found Dr. Matthews' obituary from 10 years ago. It mentioned that he was survived by his wife, Eleanor, and that they had no children. The obituary said that Dr. Matthews had always been passionate about education and helping others. This was getting interesting, but Sarah still needed more information. She decided to visit the neighborhood where Eleanor Matthews lived. The address Sarah found led her to a modest apartment building in a quiet part of Manhattan. The building was nice but not fancy. It was the kind of place where middle-class people lived, not where you would expect to find the widow of a millionaire. Sarah talked to some of Eleanor's neighbors. They all said the same thing. Eleanor was a kind, quiet woman who kept to herself. She was always polite and helpful, but she did not talk much about her past. "She brings cookies to the building meetings," one neighbor told Sarah. "She always asks about my grandchildren and remembers their names." "I've never seen her be anything but kind," said another neighbor. "She helped me carry groceries up the stairs when I hurt my back." Sarah was building a picture of Eleanor as a genuinely good person, but she still needed to understand why someone with so much money was living so simply. Sarah's breakthrough came when she found records of charitable donations. She discovered that Eleanor Matthews was connected to something called the Matthews Foundation. When Sarah researched the Matthews Foundation, she could barely believe what she found. The Matthews Foundation was one of the most generous charitable organizations in the country. Over the past 20 years, it had donated over $2 billion to help poor children get better education. The foundation had built schools in low-income neighborhoods. It had paid for thousands of college scholarships. It had provided computers and books to schools that could not afford them. But here was the most amazing part. The foundation operated completely anonymously. No one knew who was behind it. All the donations were made without any publicity or recognition. Sarah compared the dates and found that the Matthews Foundation had started giving money right after Dr. James Matthews died. The foundation's address was a law office that handled Eleanor's financial affairs. Sarah was starting to piece together the truth. Eleanor Matthews was not just the widow of a rich man. She was secretly one of the most generous people in America. Sarah called the law office that managed the Matthews Foundation. At first, they would not talk to her. They said they were required to keep their client's identity secret, I understand you want to protect her privacy, Sarah told the lawyer. But she's become famous anyway because of this video. People are calling her names and making assumptions about who she is. Maybe it's time for people to know the truth. After several conversations, the lawyer agreed to confirm what Sarah had discovered. Eleanor Matthews was indeed the anonymous founder and funder of the Matthews Foundation. She insisted on complete secrecy from the beginning, the lawyer explained. She never wanted any recognition or publicity. She just wanted to help children get a better education. Sarah asked why Eleanor lived so modestly if she had so much money. She believes in using her wealth to help others, not to show off, the lawyer said. She lives simply by choice. She could afford any lifestyle she wanted, but she prefers to put her money toward helping people. The lawyer told Sarah more about Eleanor's charitable work. She personally read every scholarship application. She visited the schools that the foundation had built. She knew the names of hundreds of children who had been helped by her money. She gets more joy from a child's graduation photo than most people get from buying expensive things, the lawyer said. Sarah realized she had uncovered an incredible story. The woman Victoria had called pathetic and embarrassing was actually someone who had quietly changed thousands of lives. Eleanor Matthews had taken her husband's fortune and used it to make the world a better place. She had done this without ever seeking praise or recognition. She was the exact opposite of someone like Victoria, who sought attention for everything she did. Sarah thought about the irony of the situation. Victoria had millions of followers and spent her time showing off expensive things that helped no one. Eleanor had no social media presence at all, but had actually helped more people than Victoria could ever imagine. The restaurant incident made more sense now, too. Eleanor's credit cards had probably been declined because she had just made another large donation to charity. She was always giving away her money to help others. Sarah knew she had to write this story. The world needed to know who Eleanor Matthews really was, but she also knew she had to be careful. Eleanor had spent decades avoiding publicity. Sarah did not want to hurt her by suddenly putting her in the spotlight. Sarah decided to try to contact Eleanor directly. She wanted to tell Eleanor's story, but only if Eleanor agreed to it. It took Sarah 2 days to find Eleanor's phone number. When she called, Eleanor's voice was soft and kind. Ms. Matthews, my name is Sarah Chen. I'm a journalist and I've been researching the incident at the restaurant. There was a long pause. I really don't want to talk about that, Eleanor said quietly. I understand, Sarah said, but I've discovered some things about you that I think people should know. You're not just any elderly woman. You're someone who has helped thousands of people. Another pause. How did you find out about the foundation? Sarah explained her research. She told Eleanor about all the mean things people were saying online and how unfair it was. People think you're someone you're not, Sarah said. They're judging you based on one moment in a restaurant. But I know the truth about who you really are and what you've done with your life. Eleanor was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke. I never wanted publicity, she said. That was never the point. I know, Sarah said. But maybe people need to hear your story right now. Maybe the world needs to be reminded that real kindness exists. Eleanor agreed to meet with Sarah the next day. She was about to become famous in a way she had never wanted, but for all the right reasons. Sarah Chen arrived at the small coffee shop in Greenwich Village 30 minutes early. She was nervous about meeting Eleanor Matthews. This story could change everything, but Sarah wanted to make sure she told it right. Eleanor arrived exactly on time. She looked just like she had in Victoria's video, wearing a simple gray sweater and black pants. Her silver hair was neatly combed, and she carried an old brown purse. But when Sarah looked into Eleanor's eyes, she saw something the video had not captured: wisdom, kindness, and strength. Ms. Chen? Eleanor asked softly. Yes, please call me Sarah. Thank you so much for meeting with me. They found a quiet table in the back of the coffee shop. Eleanor ordered plain coffee and Sarah got tea. For a few minutes, they sat in comfortable silence. I've been thinking about our phone conversation, Eleanor said. I'm not sure I want people to know about the foundation. I've worked very hard to keep it private. Sarah understood Eleanor's concerns. I know this is difficult, but I think people need to know who you really are. The things being said about you online are so unfair. Eleanor sighed. I stopped reading the comments after the first day. Some people were very cruel. That's exactly why I want to tell your story, Sarah said gently. People are judging you based on one moment. They don't know about the thousands of children you've helped go to college. They don't know about the schools you've built or the families you've supported. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. My husband always said that good deeds should be done, quietly. He believed that charity should be about helping people, not making yourself look good. He sounds like a wise man, Sarah said. He was. When James died, I could have lived any kind of life I wanted. I could have bought big houses and expensive cars. I could have traveled the world staying in fancy hotels. But that's not what would have made James proud of me. Eleanor told Sarah about the early days after her husband's death. She had been overwhelmed by grief and by the responsibility of having so much money. I didn't know what to do with it all, Eleanor admitted. James had always handled our finances. Suddenly I had more money than I could ever spend, and I felt guilty about it. Eleanor had started small. She heard about a school in a poor neighborhood that needed computers. She donated enough money to buy computers for every classroom, but she made sure her name was never mentioned. The joy I felt when I saw those children using those computers was better than any expensive purchase I could have made, Eleanor said, her eyes lighting up. From there, Eleanor's charitable work had grown. She started the Matthews Foundation and began giving away millions of dollars every year. She funded scholarships for students who could not afford college. She built libraries in areas that did not have them. She supported programs that taught children to read. I read every scholarship application myself, Eleanor told Sarah. I know their names, their dreams, their families. When they graduate from college, they send me photos. I have hundreds of pictures of kids in graduation caps and gowns on my refrigerator. Sarah was amazed by Eleanor's story, but she wanted to know more about Eleanor's daily life. How do you live? What does a normal day look like for you? Eleanor smiled. I wake up early and read the newspaper. I like to know what's happening in the world. Then I review applications for the foundation. We give away about $3 million every month, so there's always work to do. Eleanor explained that she personally visited many of the schools and programs the foundation supported. She did not announce who she was or why she was there. She just wanted to see the results of her donations with her own eyes. Last month, I visited a school we helped build in Brooklyn, Eleanor said. The children were so excited about their new library. They showed me their favorite books and told me about the stories they were writing. That's worth more than any diamond necklace. Sarah asked about the restaurant incident. Why had Eleanor been there that night? Eleanor looked embarrassed. It was my wedding anniversary. James and I used to go to that restaurant every year to celebrate. I've continued the tradition even after he passed away. It helps me feel close to him. What happened with your credit cards? I had just made a large donation earlier that day to help rebuild a school that was damaged in a fire. Sometimes when I make big transfers, the bank puts a temporary hold on my cards for security reasons. It was just bad timing. Eleanor had been humiliated and hurt by what happened at the restaurant, but she was more upset about how her private anniversary tradition had been ruined. James and I always kept our charitable work private. We believed that bragging about helping others made it about us instead of about the people we were helping. Victoria's video forced me into the spotlight in a way I never wanted. Sarah asked Eleanor what she thought about Victoria and her behavior. Eleanor was quiet for a long time before answering. I feel sorry for her. Sarah was surprised. You feel sorry for her? After what she did to you? Yes. I think she's lost her way. When you have money and fame, it's easy to forget what really matters. I think Victoria has forgotten how to see other people as human beings instead of entertainment for her followers. Eleanor told Sarah about her own past. She had not always been wealthy. She and James had both grown up in working-class families. They had struggled to pay for college and their early years of marriage. I remember what it was like to have my credit card declined, Eleanor said. I remember the shame and embarrassment. That's why Victoria's behavior hurt so much. She took a moment when I was vulnerable and used it to make herself feel superior. But Eleanor was not angry. She was sad. Victoria is young. She has time to learn and grow. I hope someday she understands that real happiness comes from helping others, not from putting others down. Sarah asked Eleanor if she would agree to a public interview about her charitable work. Eleanor hesitated. I've spent 20 years trying to stay anonymous. It feels strange to think about people knowing who I am. I understand, but think about all the good that could come from people knowing your story. Maybe it would inspire others to be more charitable. Maybe it would show people that kindness is more valuable than fame. Eleanor agreed to think about it. She gave Sarah permission to write the article about the Matthews Foundation, but she wanted to see it before it was published. Sarah spent the next 3 days writing the most important article of her career. She told Eleanor's story with care and respect. She explained how Eleanor had quietly become one of America's most generous philanthropists. The article revealed that the pathetic old woman Victoria had mocked was actually someone who had donated over $2 billion to help children get better educations. It showed that Eleanor lived modestly by choice, preferring to give her money to others rather than spend it on herself. Sarah wrote about the schools Eleanor had built, the thousands of scholarships she had funded, and the countless lives she had changed. She included quotes from some of the students who had been helped by Eleanor's generosity. Mrs. Matthews's scholarship allowed me to become the first person in my family to graduate from college, one former student had written. I'm now a teacher, helping other children the same way she helped me. When Eleanor read the article, she had tears in her eyes. You made it sound like I'm some kind of saint, Eleanor said. I just told the truth, Sarah replied. You are someone who has dedicated her life to helping others. That's pretty close to being a saint. The article was published on a Friday morning. Within hours, it had been shared thousands of times. People who had criticized Eleanor after seeing Victoria's video were now apologizing and praising her. The hashtag, Justice for Eleanor, took on a new meaning. Instead of just condemning Victoria's behavior, people began sharing stories about Eleanor's charitable work and expressing admiration for her kindness and generosity. This woman is a hero, one comment read. She's everything we should aspire to be, said another. How could anyone be cruel to someone so good, wrote a third person. The revelation about Eleanor's true identity made Victoria's behavior look even worse. People were no longer just angry about her bullying an elderly woman. They were furious that she had attacked someone who had spent her life helping others. News channels picked up Sarah's story. Television reporters stood outside the schools Eleanor had built and interviewed students she had helped. She saved my life, one college graduate told the cameras. Without her scholarship, I never could have afforded to study medicine. Now I'm a doctor helping people in my community. Eleanor watched the news coverage from her small apartment, still not quite believing that her private life had become so public. But as she saw the positive reaction to her story, Eleanor began to think that maybe Sarah had been right. Maybe people did need to be reminded that real kindness existed in the world. Maybe it was time for Eleanor to step out of the shadows and use her story to inspire others to be better. The quiet philanthropist was about to become a symbol of everything, good in humanity, while Victoria's cruelty would be remembered as an example of everything wrong with social media culture. Victoria woke up on Monday morning to discover that her life had completely fallen apart. Sarah Chen's article about Eleanor Matthews had been published 3 days ago, and the reaction had been devastating for Victoria. Her phone buzzed constantly, with notifications, but not the kind she used to enjoy. These were angry messages, canceled contracts, and legal threats. Victoria had gone from having 3 million followers to losing over 2 million in just one weekend. The first email in her inbox was from her modeling agency. Due to recent events and the negative publicity surrounding your actions, we are terminating your contract effective immediately. It read. Victoria stared at the screen in disbelief. This agency had been eager to sign her just 6 months ago. More bad news followed. The luxury hotel chain that had been paying her to promote their resorts sent a similar message. So did the jewelry company the fashion brands, and even the vitamin supplement company that had sponsored her posts. Victoria's main source of income had been these sponsorship deals. Companies paid her hundreds of thousands of dollars to show their products to her followers. Now, in the space of one weekend, she had lost almost all of that income. But the financial consequences were just the beginning. Victoria's phone rang. It was her publicist, Amanda Rodriguez. "Victoria, we need to talk," Amanda said. Her voice was cold and professional, very different from the friendly tone she usually used. "Amanda, thank God you called. We need to figure out how to fix this. Maybe I should do an apology video or—" "Victoria, stop," Amanda interrupted. "I'm calling to tell you that I can no longer represent you." Victoria felt like she had been punched in the stomach. "What do you mean?" "My other clients are threatening to leave if I continue working with you. Your reputation is too damaged, I'm sorry, but I have to think about my business." Victoria had never heard Amanda sound so final. Amanda had been her publicist for 2 years and had helped build her social media career. "But we can fix this, right?" Victoria asked desperately. "People will forget about it eventually." "Victoria, do you understand what you did? You bullied a woman who has donated billions of dollars to help children. Eleanor Matthews is now being called a saint, and you're the villain who attacked her. This isn't something that people will just forget." After Amanda hung up, Victoria sat in her expensive apartment feeling lost and confused. How had everything gone so wrong so quickly? She tried calling Marcus, but his phone went straight to voicemail. She had not spoken to him since he said he needed time to think about their engagement. Victoria decided to go out for coffee, thinking that getting out of the apartment might help her feel better. But as soon as she walked onto the street, she realized that was a mistake. People recognized her immediately. Some of them pulled out their phones to record her. Others shouted mean comments. "That's her. That's the woman who bullied the old lady," someone yelled. "You should be ashamed of yourself," another person shouted. Victoria hurried back to her building, her face red with embarrassment. She had never experienced anything like this before. Usually, when people recognized her on the street, they asked for selfies or told her how much they loved her posts. Back in her apartment, Victoria tried to understand what had happened. She went online and read Sarah Chen's article about Eleanor Matthews for the first time. As she read about Eleanor's charitable work, Victoria began to realize the magnitude of her mistake. Eleanor was not just any elderly woman. She was someone who had spent decades helping others, someone who had changed thousands of lives for the better. Victoria had attacked a person who represented everything good about humanity. And she had done it for entertainment, for likes and comments on social media. For the first time since the restaurant incident, Victoria began to feel something she was not used to feeling: genuine shame. But her problems were far from over. The next morning, Victoria received a phone call from a lawyer representing several of her former sponsors. They were suing her for damaging their brand's reputations by association. "Your actions have caused significant financial harm to our clients," the lawyer explained. "They paid you to represent their brands positively, and instead, you've become associated with cruelty and bullying." Victoria would need to find her own lawyer to defend against these lawsuits, but with her income suddenly gone, she was not sure how she would afford legal representation. Then came the call she had been dreading most. "Victoria, we need to meet," Marcus said when she answered her phone. His voice was sad but firm. They met at a quiet restaurant far from the places where they used to be seen together. Marcus looked tired and older than he had just a week ago. "I've been thinking about everything that's happened," Marcus began. "About the video, about Eleanor, about who you've become." Victoria reached across the table to take his hand, but he pulled it away gently. "I can't marry you, Victoria," he said quietly. Victoria felt her world collapse. "Marcus, please. I made a mistake, but we can work through this." "It wasn't just a mistake," Marcus said. "It was a choice. You chose to humiliate someone who was vulnerable. You chose to film it and post it online. And even now, I don't think you truly understand why what you did was so wrong." Marcus explained that the video had also caused problems for his company. Investors were concerned about being associated with someone who had behaved so cruelly. "My board of directors had an emergency meeting," Marcus said. They're worried that my association with you will hurt the company's reputation. They asked me to make a public statement distancing myself from your actions. Victoria realized that Marcus was not just ending their engagement for personal reasons. Her behavior was also threatening his business. I'm going to donate $50 million to Eleanor's foundation, Marcus announced, and I'm going to make a public statement apologizing for not stopping your behavior that night at the restaurant. Victoria watched the man she thought she would marry slip away from her. Everything she had worked for, everything she had built, was crumbling around her. That evening, Marcus held a press conference. Standing in front of cameras from major news networks, he looked serious and remorseful. I want to publicly apologize for not intervening when Victoria Ashford bullied Eleanor Matthews at the restaurant, he said. I should have stopped her behavior immediately. I failed to act, and I deeply regret that. Marcus announced his donation to the Matthews Foundation and explained that he had ended his engagement to Victoria. Actions have consequences, he said. I cannot and will not be associated with the kind of cruelty that was displayed in that video. Victoria watched the press conference from her apartment, tears streaming down her face. The man she loved was now publicly condemning her actions and cutting ties with her completely. The next day brought even worse news. Victoria's wealthy family, who had always been embarrassed by her social media career but tolerated it because of her engagement to Marcus, finally had enough. Her father called her from their estate in Connecticut. Victoria, your mother and I have been talking. We cannot continue to support you financially given your recent behavior. Victoria's family had old money and traditional values. They had never approved of her influencer lifestyle, but they had hoped that marrying Marcus would help her mature and become more responsible. You've brought shame to our family name, her father continued. Until you show real change and genuine remorse, you're on your own. Victoria had never had to worry about money because she knew her family would always support her if needed. Now even that safety net was gone. Within 1 week, Victoria had lost her income, her reputation, her fiancé, her family's support, and most of her friends. People who had once been eager to be seen with her now avoided her calls. The exclusive clubs and restaurants where Victoria used to spend her time quietly made it clear that she was no longer welcome. Her favorite spa canceled her appointments. The high-end boutiques where she used to shop stopped inviting her to private sales. Victoria's social media accounts, which had once been her source of pride and income, had become monuments to her downfall. The comments on her posts were filled with criticism and anger. People posted screenshots of Eleanor's charitable work alongside Victoria's cruel video, showing the stark contrast between the two women. Late at night, alone in her apartment, Victoria finally began to understand what she had lost. It was not just the money or the fame or even Marcus. She had lost her sense of who she was. For years, Victoria had built her identity around being better than other people, around having more money and more followers and more attention. But now she realized how empty that identity had been. Eleanor Matthews, the woman Victoria had called pathetic, had lived a life of meaning and purpose. She had used her resources to help others and had found joy in their success. Victoria had used her resources only to make herself look good, and it had all been taken away in an instant. As Victoria sat in her expensive apartment surrounded by designer clothes and luxury items that no longer brought her any happiness, she began to wonder if it was too late to become a different kind of person. But changing would mean admitting that everything she had believed about herself and what mattered in life had been wrong, and Victoria was not sure she was ready for that kind of honesty. 2 weeks after Sarah Chen's article was published, Eleanor Matthews made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She agreed to do a television interview. For 20 years, Eleanor had avoided all publicity. She had turned down interviews, refused awards, and kept her charitable work completely private. But the response to Sarah's article had shown her something she had not expected. People need hope right now, Eleanor told Sarah over the phone. Maybe my story can remind people that kindness still exists in the world. The interview was scheduled with Channel 7 News, and Sarah Chen would be the one asking the questions. They decided to film it in the library of one of the schools that Eleanor's foundation had built in Brooklyn. Eleanor was nervous as she sat in the small chair across from Sarah. Cameras and bright lights surrounded them, and several crew members moved quietly around the room. Eleanor had never been on television before. "Just speak from your heart," Sarah told her gently. "That's what made your story so powerful in the first place." The interview began with Sarah asking Eleanor about her late husband and how the Matthews Foundation started. "James always believed that education was the most important gift you could give someone," Eleanor said, her voice soft but clear. "When he passed away, I knew the best way to honor his memory was to help children learn and grow." Eleanor spoke about visiting the schools her foundation had built and reading scholarship applications from students who dreamed of going to college. "I have a wall in my apartment covered with graduation photos," Eleanor said, smiling for the first time since the cameras started rolling. "These young people become doctors and teachers and engineers. They go back to their communities and help others. That's what makes life meaningful." Sarah asked about the restaurant incident and how Eleanor felt about what Victoria had done. Eleanor was quiet for a moment before answering. "I was hurt and embarrassed. But more than that, I was sad. Sad that someone so young had learned to see other people as sources of entertainment, rather than as human beings with feelings and dignity." "Are you angry at Victoria Ashford?" Sarah asked. Eleanor shook her head. "I feel sorry for her. I think she's lost her way. When you have money and attention, it's easy to forget what really matters in life. I hope she can find her way back to kindness." This answer surprised many people watching the interview. They expected Eleanor to be angry and want revenge against Victoria. Instead, she showed the same grace and compassion that had guided her charitable work for 20 years. "What would you say to Victoria if she were watching this interview?" Sarah asked. Eleanor looked directly into the camera. "I would tell her that it's never too late to change. I would tell her that real happiness comes from helping others, not from putting them down. And I would tell her that she's young enough to build a life of meaning if she chooses to." The interview lasted for 30 minutes. But those words to Victoria became the most important part. Eleanor's message was not about revenge or punishment. It was about redemption and hope. The interview aired that evening during the local news, but clips from it quickly spread across the internet. People were amazed by Eleanor's grace and wisdom. Many said they had never seen someone respond to cruelty with such kindness. Meanwhile, Victoria was watching the interview from her apartment. She had been hiding there for 2 weeks, afraid to go outside because of how people treated her on the street. When Eleanor looked into the camera and spoke directly to her, Victoria felt something she had not experienced in years: genuine remorse. Not sadness about getting caught or losing her lifestyle, but true regret for causing pain to someone who did not deserve it. For the first time since the restaurant incident, Victoria cried. Not angry tears or self-pity tears, but tears of shame and realization about who she had become. The next morning, Victoria made a decision. She was going to find Eleanor Matthews and apologize in person. Victoria had no idea how to contact Eleanor, so she started by calling the lawyer who managed the Matthews Foundation. At first, the lawyer would not even take her call. "Ms. Ashford, I don't think Ms. Matthews wants to hear from you," the lawyer said when Victoria finally reached him. "Please," Victoria said. "I just want to apologize. I know I can't undo what I did, but I need her to know that I'm sorry." The lawyer agreed to pass along Victoria's message, but he made no promises that Eleanor would respond. Victoria spent the rest of the day thinking about what she would say if she got the chance to speak to Eleanor. She realized she had never really apologized for anything in her adult life. She had made excuses, blamed other people, or simply ignored her mistakes until people forgot about them. This was different. This required her to admit that she had been wrong, that she had hurt someone, and that she needed to change. The lawyer called Victoria back that evening. "Ms. Matthews has agreed to meet with you," he said, "but she has conditions. No cameras, no recording devices, no social media, posts about the meeting. This is private." Victoria agreed immediately. She did not want publicity from this meeting. For the first time in years, she wanted to do something that was not for show. They arranged to meet at the same coffee shop in Greenwich Village where Eleanor had first spoken to Sarah Chen. Victoria arrived early and sat in the corner, her hands shaking with nervousness. Eleanor walked in exactly on time, wearing a simple navy blue sweater and carrying her old brown purse. She looked calm and dignified, nothing like the embarrassed woman from the restaurant video. Victoria stood up as Eleanor approached the table. "Ms. Matthews, thank you for agreeing to see me." Eleanor sat down across from Victoria and studied her face. Victoria looked different than she had in the restaurant. She was not wearing makeup, her hair was simple, and her clothes were plain. Most importantly, her expression was humble instead of arrogant. "What did you want to say to me?" Eleanor asked gently. Victoria had practiced this moment in her head dozens of times, but now that she was sitting across from Eleanor, all her prepared words seemed inadequate. "I'm sorry," Victoria said, her voice breaking. "I'm so deeply sorry for what I did to you. There's no excuse for it. You didn't deserve to be treated that way by anyone, especially not me." Eleanor listened without saying anything, her kind eyes focused on Victoria's face. "I know you probably think I'm only sorry because I got caught and lost everything," Victoria continued. "And maybe that's part of it. But watching your interview made me realize something. I had become a person I don't like. I had become cruel and shallow and mean." Victoria told Eleanor about her life before she became famous, about how she had been a different person when she was younger. "I used to volunteer at an animal shelter when I was in college," Victoria said. "I actually cared about helping things that were hurt. I don't know when I stopped being that person." Eleanor spoke for the first time since sitting down. "What do you plan to do now?" Victoria was honest. "I don't know. I've lost everything I thought mattered to me, and I'm starting to realize that maybe those things weren't really important anyway. I don't know how to be a good person anymore, but I want to learn." Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that Victoria never expected to hear. "I'd like to help you with that." Victoria looked up in shock. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I believe people can change if they truly want to. I've seen it happen with some of the young people our foundation has helped. They made mistakes, sometimes serious ones, but they found their way back to being good." Eleanor explained that she had been thinking about Victoria since the interview. She had decided that perhaps this situation could become something positive, if Victoria was genuinely willing to change. "There's a homeless shelter in Brooklyn where I volunteer sometimes," Eleanor said. "They need help serving meals and organizing donations. It's not glamorous work, and there are no cameras or social media opportunities. Are you interested?" Victoria nodded immediately. "Yes. I want to do something real, something that actually helps people." Eleanor smiled for the first time during their meeting. "Good. We'll start tomorrow. And Victoria, this isn't about redemption or fixing your image. This is about becoming the kind of person who deserves redemption." As they left the coffee shop together, Victoria felt something she had not experienced in years. Hope. Not hope for getting her old life back, but hope for building a new life that actually meant something. Eleanor had shown Victoria that even someone who had behaved as badly as she had could be offered a chance to change. The question now was whether Victoria was truly ready to do the hard work of becoming a better person. The unlikely friendship between the philanthropist and the fallen influencer was about to begin, and it would change both of their lives in ways neither of them expected. 6 months had passed since Victoria Ashford first walked into the Riverside Community Shelter in Brooklyn. She arrived that first morning wearing designer jeans and expensive sneakers, looking completely out of place among the volunteers in their simple clothes and comfortable shoes. Eleanor Matthews was waiting for her at the entrance, wearing a worn apron over her usual simple sweater. "Are you ready to work?" Eleanor asked with a kind but serious expression. Victoria nodded, though she had no idea what she was getting into. The shelter served breakfast to over 200 homeless people every morning. Victoria's job was simple: serve food, clean tables, and treat every person who came through the door with dignity and respect. At first, Victoria was terrible at it. She dropped plates, spilled coffee, and moved too slowly to keep up with the busy breakfast rush. She was not used to physical work or to being around people who were struggling with poverty, addiction, and mental illness. "This is harder than I thought it would be," Victoria admitted to Eleanor after her first week. Most important things are, Eleanor replied. The question is whether you're going to give up or keep trying. Victoria kept trying. Slowly, she began to get better at the work. More importantly, she began to understand the people she was serving. She learned their names and their stories. She discovered that many of them were not that different from her. There was Robert, a former business owner who had lost everything when his company failed. There was Maria, a single mother who worked 2 jobs but still could not afford rent. There was David, a veteran who struggled with mental health issues after returning from war. I used to think homeless people were just lazy or made bad choices, Victoria told Eleanor one day as they cleaned up after breakfast. I never realized how many different ways someone could end up needing help. Eleanor smiled. That's the first step toward real compassion, understanding that any of us could face hard times. As the weeks passed, Victoria found herself looking forward to her shifts at the shelter. She started arriving early and staying late. She began to care about the people she served, asking about their day and remembering details about their lives. Victoria, you've changed, Robert told her one morning as she served him breakfast. When you first started here, you looked scared of us. Now you look like you actually care. I do care, Victoria realized as she said it. I really do. But Victoria's transformation was not just happening at the shelter. Her court-ordered community service had also opened her eyes to how much need existed in the world. She spent afternoons at a senior center, helping elderly people with computer classes and reading programs. She worked at a food bank, sorting donations and packaging meals for families in need. At first, Victoria had resented these obligations. They were punishment for her behavior, forced labor to make up for what she had done to Eleanor. But gradually, they became something more. I think I understand now why you kept your charity work private, Victoria told Eleanor one evening as they walked home from the shelter together. What do you mean? Eleanor asked. When I was an influencer, I did everything for attention. Even when I donated money or helped with charity events, it was really about making myself look good. But this work? It's just about the work. It's about helping people because they need help, not because it makes me look like a good person. Eleanor nodded approvingly. That's a very important lesson to learn. Victoria's old life seemed like a distant memory. Her expensive apartment had been sold to pay legal fees. She now lived in a small studio apartment in Queens and took the subway to work like millions of other New Yorkers. Her designer clothes had been replaced with practical outfits from discount stores. Her expensive car was gone, traded for a monthly subway pass. Her jewelry had been sold except for one simple necklace that had belonged to her grandmother. At first, these changes had felt like punishment. But Victoria was surprised to discover that she was happier now than she had been when she was rich and famous. I don't miss it as much as I thought I would, Victoria told Eleanor. The constant pressure to look perfect, to always be on for the cameras, to compete with other influencers for attention. It was exhausting. Victoria had also started therapy to understand why she had become so cruel and entitled. Dr. Patricia Williams, her therapist, helped her see how her pursuit of fame and wealth had gradually eroded her empathy and kindness. You built your identity around being better than other people, Dr. Williams explained. When your sense of self-worth depends on being superior, you have to find ways to make others seem inferior. Victoria learned about the psychological effects of social media fame, about how constant validation from strangers could become addictive. She understood now why she had become so focused on likes and comments instead of real relationships and meaningful work. Meanwhile, Eleanor had been watching Victoria's transformation with hope and pride. She had taken a big risk in offering to help Victoria, and many people had criticized her for it. Why are you wasting your time on that horrible girl? Some of Eleanor's friends had asked. But Eleanor had seen something in Victoria that reminded her of her own past. Before marrying James, Eleanor had been young and selfish too. She had cared more about parties and clothes than about other people's feelings. James helped me become a better person, Eleanor told Sarah Chen when the journalist called to check on Victoria's progress. Maybe I can do the same for Victoria. Eleanor's faith in Victoria was being rewarded. The young woman who had once filmed herself bullying an elderly woman was now spending her free time reading to blind seniors and teaching homeless children basic math skills. One morning, as Victoria served breakfast at the shelter, she noticed a new face in line. It was a young woman about her own age, obviously struggling and embarrassed to be there. "First time?" Victoria asked gently as she served the woman eggs and toast. The woman nodded, tears in her eyes. "I never thought I'd be in a place like this. None of us ever think we will be," Victoria said kindly. "But you're here now, and that means you're taking care of yourself. That takes courage." Eleanor watched this interaction from across the room and smiled. The Victoria who had mocked her for being unable to pay a restaurant bill was now offering comfort and dignity to someone in a similar situation. After 6 months of community service, Victoria appeared in court for her final hearing. The judge reviewed reports from all the organizations where she had volunteered. "Ms. Ashford," the judge said, "I have to admit I was skeptical when you began this community service. I thought you might just go through the motions to satisfy the court's requirements. But every supervisor has given you outstanding reviews. They say you've become an essential volunteer who genuinely cares about the people you serve." Victoria stood up to address the court. "Your Honor, when I started this community service, I was angry and resentful. I thought it was unfair punishment for one mistake. But I've learned that what I did wasn't a mistake. It was a choice that came from years of believing that having money made me better than other people." Victoria continued. "The real punishment wasn't the community service. The real punishment was losing the chance to be a good person for so many years. This work has taught me what I should have known all along, that every person deserves dignity and kindness, regardless of their circumstances." The judge was impressed by Victoria's words and her obvious sincerity. "Ms. Ashford, your community service requirement has been fulfilled, but I hope you'll continue this work because you want to, not because you have to." "I will, Your Honor," Victoria promised. "This work has become the most meaningful part of my life." After the hearing, Eleanor and Victoria walked out of the courthouse together. They had both been changed by their unlikely friendship. Eleanor had learned that her story could inspire others to be kinder and more generous. She had started giving occasional interviews and speeches, using her newfound fame to promote charitable giving and volunteer work. Victoria had learned that a life of service was more fulfilling than a life of selfishness. She had enrolled in college courses to study social work, planning to make helping others her career instead of just her volunteer work. "Do you ever regret what happened at the restaurant?" Eleanor asked Victoria as they stood on the courthouse steps. Victoria thought, for a moment, "I regret hurting you. I regret being cruel. But I don't regret the consequences. They forced me to become a person I can actually respect." Eleanor smiled. "James would have liked you, you know. The you that you are now." "Do you think people can really change?" Victoria asked. "I know they can," Eleanor said confidently. "I've seen it happen with you." A year later, Victoria graduated from her social work program. Eleanor attended the ceremony, sitting in the front row with a proud smile on her face. Victoria now worked full-time at the Riverside Community Shelter, earning a modest salary, but finding more satisfaction in her work than she had ever found in her influencer career. She still used social media, but differently. Instead of posting pictures of expensive things, she shared stories about the people she helped. Instead of seeking attention for herself, she used her remaining followers to raise money for homeless services and elderly care programs. The Matthews Foundation had started a new program called Second Chances,